Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Board of Trustees of the town of Buena Vista. It's October 25th, 2022. The time is 7:13. Paula, would you do a roll call, please?
Mayor Fay,
Here?
Trustee Cobb,
Here.
Trustee Hilton Hinga,
Here.
Trustee Jenkins,
Here.
Trustee LaCretzi,
Here.
Trustee Rowe,
Here.
Trustee Swisher.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You have before you an agenda. Any changes or additions or deletions to the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Second. So I have Rowe.
Yeah.
Rowe, Swisher. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Then we have also the consent agenda. The consent agenda has minutes from some of the advisory boards. It also has the town clerk report, and it has some approvals of contracts. And do we need to talk about any of these separate from leaving them in the consent agenda? So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second. Jenkins, Cobb. All in favor?
Aye.
Mayor Fay, do we need to do a roll call vote on that since it does have some large amount of money on the professional service agreements?
I think we should.
Okay. Right, and I'm sorry, who seconded that? Excuse me.
Oh,
Jenkins made the motion. Cobb, thanks, guys. All right, roll call.
Okay,
Trustee Cobb,
which one are you doing?
the consent agenda.
Yeah, but there are, oh, okay.
I can just do it all as one whole. That's one whole roll call vote for
Oh,
all
okay.
special agreements.
Great, thanks, Paula.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Trustee Cobb, Trustee Hilton Hinga,
Yes.
Trustee Jenkins,
Yes.
Trustee LaCretzi,
Yes.
Trustee Rowe,
Yes.
and Trustee Swisher.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion passes. Lisa, do you see anybody on Zoom for public comment? You found none? Okay. Public comment is a part of the meeting in which we allow people to come and talk to us about items that are not on the agenda. And they are limited to 3 minutes of comment, but we really appreciate the public coming to speak to us. So keep that in mind, and we'll hope for more public comment next time. So now we have staff reports.
I think that starts with me.
It does.
So you'll see some highlights of my report. I finished for the most part, I will visit this tomorrow, actually, the courts. So I'll get to kind of see them in action. I'm with Grant, the code enforcement officer, and then meet the judge and clerk there. And so I'll get to interact with them and see what that piece of the internal that we have in their job duties and shadow them. And then I did have opportunity to meet with the police force as a whole. They had a dinner at the Clearview Community Church. And so I got to spend some time with them over dinner, and it was really great of Clearview Community Church to host that for us. It was in recognition of their rescue response. and to recognize them for those efforts. And I got to see Thor the dog in action. So we actually hid some stuff for him to find, and so that was quite fun. And the other things that I put in there that I want to point out to you is that our staff reports will start looking a little bit different. We are reducing some redundancy. Right now, town administrator, myself, and the treasurer both give reports, the first meeting and the second meeting of the month. We're going to split that up so that you get a report from me the first meeting and then a report from the treasurer the second meeting. And then we have quite a few that we do in each meeting. So we're going to space that out a little bit more. So you'll get to hear their verbal reports every other month. So they still get to have some FaceTime with you directly, which I think is important, but you'll continue to get the written reports as you already do. So you'll see a monthly report in writing from them each time. And so we'll see how that goes. And if you have any feedback for me on that, your thoughts on that, please let me know. Just trying to streamline the process a little bit more and gain a sense of it's fine. The other thing that I talk about is performance reviews. We're in that mode. We're kicking that off internally, and just some other internal projects. Do you have any questions on my report that you might have wanted me to talk on other than that? All right, thank you.
Thank you. So now we have the treasurer. Are you up? Are you gonna do a staff report?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So the overview, so it's third quarter 2022 report in your packet, which contains several items. Page 147, that memo provides you an overview of everything that's contained in this report. I will highlight a couple of specific things. So if we go to page 149, which is the regular report for tonight, it includes the sales tax results for our actuals for August. But before I jump down to that, just a couple of quick updates. We did find out this past week confirmation that the town was approved for a $4.3 million loan towards our water treatment plant, which is very, very exciting. And of that, a little over $2.3 million, up to $2.3 million, will be received in loan forgiveness. So by the time we fund the entire loan, it'll be a smaller amount, about 1.9 million and change. So very, very good news. That's part of the bill, bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed, I guess, earlier this year. And we're very grateful for that, and our partners on that project, Sean, who's leading it, leading all those engineers through all this work. But a lot of effort went into this. I do want to recognize the team, and it's great to see continued success on the part I work on now, which is the finance part of this. So that's great to see. We also did submit reimbursement for our first draw from the DOLA grant for our police station. So we did receive a little over $80,000 this last cycle towards that project. So that's good to see. Scrolling down a little bit there, you can see the sales tax actuals for August came in, and pretty busy month, up about just under 22% compared to August 2021, and just under 17% compared to budget. I did see some what I would call catch-up payments, not the condiment catch-up, but the hey, we found a few things that weren't paid in previous months. And when that happens, it happens every once in a while. When that happens, it hits all in one month, and then I take it and I spread it back to the months that it applied to. So I wouldn't say it was the reason for the increase, but it was just something I noticed. But definitely a busy month as we saw in August. And let me scroll down just a little bit. I changed the tables a little bit here to make it easier on an ongoing basis to show local versus remote sales tax. So on that next page there, right there. The first table in blue is the local businesses that are located or have an address here in town versus the green, which is the remote. So same kind of analysis, just split out a little bit different here. So you can see that both local and remote were up in August. And again, these numbers change from month to month. So if you ever take a snapshot of this report and you look at the next report and you go, well, wait a minute, those numbers change. That's going back to that kind of catch up. Things come in for up to 2 years in the past. And so it makes these monthly numbers fluctuate a lot, but we realize that actual in the month that we receive it. So that's why we report a number. That's what we book as revenue. But then when we do the analysis, those back months, you'll see those numbers fluctuate a little bit. So if you noticed it, that's the reason why. And let's scroll down. We got the usual graphs and included here for sales tax and balance sheet, things like that. Let's go to page 154, please, and 155. So like we've been doing for our quarterly reports, we provide 2 fund balance reports. The first one in blue is where we stand right now as of the end of September, I should say. Where based on actual expenses, actual revenues, and then budgeted the remainder of our budget, what our fund balances look like. It's good information in that we can kind of see where our fund balances sit as of now, but knowing that we still have quite a bit of revenue and expenses for the remainder of the year, it doesn't really show you, okay, where will we stand at the end of the year? So that's what the next report looks at on page 155. So what I'm starting to do now that we're getting closer to the end of the year is starting to capture expenses and revenues that we know are going to be different than budget, right? So if we know, like for Arizona Trail, for example, let's use that one because we never do as an example. We know that we're not going to spend that money this year, nor are we going to have the grant revenue this year. So I'm starting to capture those variances from our budget so that you can see where the fund balances should be roughly by the end of 2022. So you can see that there, we'll have about 1.2 million in the general fund. We should have just under 600,000 in the capital improvement fund, about 3.3 million in the water fund. So as we continue to progress through the end of the year, I'm going to be utilizing this kind of analysis quite a bit. I will also take this at the next meeting and provide some analysis on fund balances for 2023. So that as we're looking at budget for next year, I'll show you as best I can, I'll show you what the proposed budget will do to the fund balances if the board were to proceed with the budget as it's drafted. So that you can see when we say we're going to spend fund balance for carryover projects, or hey, we have a gap and funding in our general fund capital projects next year, and the board could spend into fund balance to cover that. Here's what that will look like. So that's what these reports show. I'll stop there. A lot of information is contained in here, but I'll stop there, take questions if you have any.
Questions for the treasurer? Okay, good job, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, Joseph, planning director.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees. My report can be found on page 162 and following. I won't necessarily spend any time on my regular report, but please do feel free to ask questions. So pages 162, 163, and the normal monthly water dashboard on 164 are all there, and I'm happy to answer detailed questions on those. What I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes on starts on page 165, which is a memo that I put together, really sort of proposing a framework for our comp plan update. So as you all know, our current comp plan was adopted in 2015. And per statute and sort of best practices, we're supposed to update that at least every 10 years. We're nearing that timeline, but I think we also recognize how much has changed since 2015. And frankly, how much we've accomplished as a community from that 2015 plan. And so it's really high time to look at it again. And you all have been expressing that over the past several months. So in response, this memo outlines a process that could unfold over the coming year. And it has 4 phases. So the idea would be to start with phase 1 and launch that essentially immediately. And that phase 1 is really a scope defining phase. It's what we might call a pre-launch phase, where we're very publicly asking questions related to what folks want to see in a new comp plan. What would success look like in a new comp plan? How would they want to be able to use a new comp plan for the topics, questions, et cetera, that folks would want dealt with in that? And what kind of process do we as a community want to have unfold to produce that plan? As you all saw detailed in my memo, but the process of updating the comp plan is in itself one of the outcomes that we should look to. It can either set us all up for success by having a solid process that leads to a document we can all trust, or inversely, it can set us up for failure because we do not have a process that produced a trustworthy plan. So that first phase is really multifaceted, but a sort of question defining success phase. The end result of that phase would be a publishing of an RFP. It would have a detailed scope for a consultant that would join us as a community for the rest of the comp plan process. And then phase 2 is really the meat. That's where the sort of full on community engagement, listening, work sessions, interviews, focus groups, data gathering, any other sub-studies that we might need to do, any other data that we might need to collect from tertiary or secondary sources would happen in phase 2. And then phases 3 and 4 are both reflecting back to community based on what we heard in phase 2. And then phase 4 would be actually drafting, testing, so to speak, and then finalizing that new comp plan. And so one question I have for you, in addition to overall feedback that I'd love to hear from you on that memo and this idea, what would be on one public meeting that could happen as part of phase 1. So the week of November 30th is a week after Thanksgiving. There's actually no board meetings and no planning and zoning commission meetings that week. So look at me presenting the idea of the meeting. So you're welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
The idea would be to have a 2-part public meeting. The first part would be really focused on you all as a board and getting to Trustee Jenkins' idea last meeting of an opportunity for you all to talk with each other about where you see this town going, what your values are, what your visions are, what you would like to see in a comp plan process and update. This is not necessarily our annual retreat, right, where we're talking about the next year's goals specifically, but it's more higher level than that. It's helping to set the stage for how the comp plan process rolls out. The second part of that public meeting immediately following your time would be a broad public meeting where we're inviting public in, we're presenting on what a comp plan is, why it's important, and then we're going through a series of activities with folks that attend to generate ideas, questions, topics, processes that we would then use to help define the scope for phases 2, 3, and 4. So that's the primary thing that I was hoping to get some direction from you on tonight. is the idea of you all gathering for what would become the first part of a two-part meeting to help launch this comp plan process. And we can obviously dive into the agenda for that in between now and then. We don't need to do that tonight, but I wanted to see if you were open to that idea, if you prefer not to see that idea happen, all the above. And I'm also happy to take questions or comments on this action memo.
So,
Well, as far as the meetings go, I think definitely the meeting that Mark suggested, I'm all in on that. The only thing about the second part is just if it's too busy, crazy a time to expect too many folks, unless you have ideas for how to, I mean, I'm sure you have ideas for how to attract participation, but I think it's a little bit of a difficult time to bring people together. But on the other hand, it's not going to get any easier for quite a bit of time after that. So, I definitely go along with that if we feel like we can pull people in. As far as your memo and plan, I think it's awesome. I really like the community champions idea. I like just the whole community engagement. And I agree fully that that is a huge benefit and outcome of the process in that it just builds, I think, trust potentially. I mean, you handled it correctly, which of course it will be, but just, it builds a lot of trust in government and in our town. So, and just energy as well. So I like that idea. The one thing I saw at the very end that I would add, as far as, I can't remember, as far as the groups that you would be invited, and I know it's a preliminary list, but I would include the airport advisory board on that one too, just because I think they do have some ideas for things that would affect the whole community. So,
Absolutely.
so anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you
for that.
I do think getting participation at any in-person meeting anytime is challenging. Not to mention during the holidays.
Yeah.
I think if we don't find some time that week, it won't happen this year.
Right.
And so that was my hope.
Sure.
Is that felt like a little bit of a window we had,
Yes.
and recognizing that as a parent, I would sort of have to be back that week right after Thanksgiving because the school is still in session.
Okay.
So hoping that would lead to some uptick in participation knowing that school
Sure.
is in session.
Okay, good to know.
And the phase two is focused on how to actually pull feedback from the community, right? So
True.
like this kind of launches it so we can actually get the ball rolling, right? And then in the phase two, as we start to go, I mean, hopefully we do get more contribution in that first meeting. That'd be great, but
If not, we've got that whole.
then we had a whole
engagement
second
phase.
phase to try to actually pull it out.
Yeah, this phase one is really gathering input on what needs to go into the scope for the RFP requests so that we can make sure that we have a very good contract that we would be signing up with the consultants that we can bind them to. And so frankly, by gathering that feedback up front, which I think is a brilliant idea, we are able to then put those things into it and make sure that they're delivering, hold them to that. Right. So it is important, but it is not the engagement, true engagement piece of the comp plan. It's more for building the scope.
One other thing I'll just add on that is that I would expect and hope that folks that show up to an initial meeting in this first phase are folks that are probably a little bit more tuned in to town in general and maybe candidates for becoming community champions as I define that memo. So it will also act as a bit of a priming or recruiting tool for those folks that are already a little bit more predisposed to get even deeper engaged. So I think that's one of the facets of it. Great.
Gina, you have anything? She's still there?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes, of course I'm still here. You can see me, can't you?
We could, yeah.
Okay. No, I think that all sounds great. I'm excited about them. Excited that we're going to start moving on that because I think that will give us a lot of direction for a lot of future decisions. So no, but it sounds great. Thanks so much for putting it together.
Anybody else? Thanks, Gina.
I'm a little nervous about the timeline as far as the public involvement around the holiday. Kind of speak from experience. I know what happens around here. people pretty much shut down, they're traveling and everything. I'm just a little nervous about getting any participation during that time of the year. So that's my only concern. The rest of it's awesome, but that part, I just want to make sure, we get really good, a lot of people involved.
Yeah, I mean, and I serve at your direction as a board for sure. Single opportunity we are asking for participation on between now and the end of the year is that one meeting that week of November 30th. There'll also be an online survey that we'll be launching in the next couple of weeks. But we wouldn't be actually launching the in-depth community engagement strategies of phase 2 until at least February, if not March. And then those would last for at least 2, 3, 4 months. So I do hope to be well past in the holiday season by the time we get into the meeting.
I guess saying that initial contact with the public up front there will give us kind of an idea how people want to participate in this process too.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Maybe we could offer food.
Well,
That might tend to get people out more.
to be quite serious about that too, in my 2023 budget request, I did increase my department's food and meeting budget, anticipating that we would be providing more food at more meetings. Because yeah, it's a very real way to get folks to come and sit here.
Sad but true.
Explain to that first meeting, Joseph, again. So it'd be that our vision, the boards, that question I asked. And that same night, it would be public. How would that look again?
Yeah, so my vision would be something like maybe a 5:30 meeting with you all that might be limited to 60 to 90 minutes. And I would look for your direction on that. And then starting at around 7, we would have a public open meeting. I mean, obviously the meeting with you all will be noticed as a public meeting. Folks can come in and observe. But folks, we'd actually dive in. We'd probably reorient the room a little bit real quick or have it pre-set up. And then have more of a public facing, about 60 to 90 minute meeting starting at 7.
No, I think that'll be a good feeler to see what involvement we're gonna have. So, yeah.
If I can give a suggestion for that meeting, and it might already be in the works, so like if we could maybe even have an agenda or talk about kind of best ways to prepare for the meeting, several weeks ahead of time. So, it's like read the previous comp plans and then going through what you have listed here, like all your several questions, but a way for kind of everyone to come in prepared and ready to go. So we know we're going on this issue, and come prepared. Here are some starter questions for you. But kind of having that well ahead of time for everybody kind of get good and prepared to show up with to then build around.
Appreciate that. I can work with Mayor Fay and Administrator Rowe to build that agenda and get those questions teed up and make sure that those are distributed well in advance of Thanksgiving, hopefully to give you all a ruminating time and time to prepare.
Yeah, personally, I'll be out of town for the holiday visiting family. So I'm not sure if there'll be an online component or not, or, I'd be happy to join online. I'll be on the East Coast, but I'm not sure how
That's
that.
possible. I would.
Yeah, I would expect us to have
Yeah.
a hybrid functionality, especially for your part of the meeting. And we'll see what that looks like for the public part. It might be an observation only hybrid, where we're not actually getting a lot of participation from folks on Zoom, but I need to flesh that out a little bit more.
Cool.
Yeah, I like the community champions idea too. I think that's a great way to try to get more participation.
Right.
I think that's good.
Just out of curiosity, how do you, when you send out the RFP, like once we get through that process, what are the general, I'm new to this kind of consulting world for town planning, or what's kind of the other folks who specialize just on comp plans, or is it
There are.
basic community building? Like, what is that? I'm just kind of curious.
So we would put it out, probably a news release and on the website as an open bid, open timeframe for consultants to bid on the work. And they would prepare proposals in response to our RFP, which is going to have a built-in scope that's pretty detailed based on that phase 1. and how they would plan to provide the areas that we're asking for. And some of the detail of phase one, I think, is to kind of vet through the extent of how much you want staff involved and what areas you want staff involved. So we'll ask some questions to that, correct, Joseph? So we can kind of get a feel for what exactly do we want the consultants to take care of? Because we have some thoughts about just some data collection and really staff handling engagement, but we can go at it many different angles, so.
And we're looking at the budget then, is this something where, you know, like with the housing assessment, we had a DOLA grant for that. Are there grants out there for this, or are we building that in? I mean, I'm jumping ahead up.
No, that's a very good question. So we have a meeting that we're hoping to meet with DOLA, new DOLA rep. And that might be some questions that we ask if there's some opportunities out there. But we have also budgeted, I think,
$75,000 total
Yeah.
with about 16,000 coming from grant.
right,
So far, and then hopefully there's more out there, but
right.
Gotcha. And not so far, like we're hoping to get 16 grand.
hoping to get.
Yeah,
Right.
that's not confirmed yet,
Right.
Yeah, that's,
but that is.
We don't have that on the table yet.
And advertising channels would be everything from CML to APA, American Planning Association, to the other sort of consultant and forum sort of type settings. There's a lot of BidNet type websites where municipalities post bidding opportunities, so we'll advertise to all those channels.
We'll get, then we'll be provided with their proposals, hopefully in a timely manner, meeting all the thresholds and requirements we build into this one. And then we'll review those internally and decide which ones are the top ones that we want to interview. And we'll probably have meetings to interview them and then par it down to the one that best fits. And I have a criteria chart that can help us a little bit with, you know, costs and all that. So we'll build that together. And it is kind of a lengthy process to get to the right consultant, but I think it's a worthy cause. I think that your RFP and your scope is probably the most important piece with a long-term plan, because you want to make sure and get the right person for this community. I mean, I think there's lots of really great ones, but we want one that's going to be good for what we need here. And that's why we want to ask people, what do we need? So, yeah. Okay, Public Works.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. So you're all accustomed to seeing the water production comparisons annually. If you have any questions, we can circle back around on that. Pretty much the same trend that we're seeing there. The one thing we did see is IDP kind of went back to the normal unaccounted usage. So that last month of low water unaccounted was more of an anomaly. Like I was kind of heard that it might be anyways. Water expansion project, yeah, we're right on track. Some fantastic news this last week. So we are on track. Last week I did receive the 90% design documents. So in our spare time, my spare time, I've been going through the 689-page project manual and the 62-page set of plans there. So anyways, we got, you know, staff-wise, I need to prioritize that because we have such a tight timeline on that to get that back to CDPHE and get the project kind of dialed in for 2022. So between the required documents that need to be reviewed and approved by CDPHE, we're just having to prioritize that. With that being said, you know, it's been fantastic. Our planning team has been helping pick up the slack for some of the development review between Joseph, Doug, and Gary and his team with RG and Associates. And they're doing fantastic. You know, we just have a few things that we're working on there, just a couple, right? So, but RG has been also helping me with the source water protection review for the Elk Run subdivision. So they presented a draft. It's going to be like a two-part application process. So they presented to staff the town with a draft application for street road construction in there. And so RG's team, primarily with Gary Walp, he's the town's drainage engineer, stormwater engineer. So those are the impacts that we see with that. And so the main thing that we want to do is identify the ordinance that we have in place, and if there's any deficiencies that we see with the civil plans coming in, maybe some detention capacities might need to be identified, but also, once you start to develop roads and construct roads, you also have impacts that, are new. Drainage paths change, and if there's asphalt being installed, then you have some runoff issues with some potential contaminants, at least, early on in the project. But we should have that review of the draft wrapped up this week. We'll see how it goes. Still plugging away with well 3. I guess I'd just say go jump into the street projects. I didn't really know how to frame this, but I will say, we should all feel proud of the projects that we did this year, and thank you and our community between the crack sealing, the chip sealing, the survey sealing, and the overlays. It was a pretty significant improvement to our streets. I don't think, I've been with the town a long time. I haven't ever seen this amount of work being compiled in one season. So good investment on some of our inconvenience with our, amount of people that are here in the summertime possibly, but the contractor did a fantastic job. We have one area where Atmos was in that might have to be reworked. And they were doing it's always nice to fix some things up before you get in there and fix the streets. So we generally share that with our agencies that work with us. So Atmos was working on a service line that was installed on James Street, and it's nothing too bad. We're just not as happy as I would like to see it, but that's good stuff there. The standards and specs has kind of taken a back burner, unfortunately. I still think that we'll be able to get that to you in 2022, but we've had to kind of move that back just to make sure that we could handle the water plant expansion project with my time mostly. A couple things that are coming up: the final acceptance inspection walkthrough is pending for the farm phase 1. I will say that that's a good model for our community. I think that the balance between the aesthetics and the vision and the landscaping and how it's held together in these few years, I think it's done a great job. The project is beautiful. We have a handful of things that we need to get resolved, but for the most part, I thought that project came out good. It's been a 2-year warranty for phase 1. And for the most part, the only deficiencies were the same items that we identified that needed to be repaired for final acceptance, which was the crack here in the concrete and things like that. So, but we're working to get staff and the development team involved on a final walkthrough with that. And again, I really need to prioritize that, but I have a hard time with what we're doing right now with the water plant. A couple of preliminary acceptance are also coming our way with South Main and some other developments. Anyways, I'll leave it there. And if you have any questions with anything, we'll answer. Thanks.
I have a question. So now do you have a plan to proceed with Ivy League since it went back to where it was? Maybe their system is so faulty that there's other areas that gave up after an area was fixed.
Yeah, I think what I want to do, and Joe and I were talking about this, and hand off the information that we have for 2022 and kind of look at it, get an update on the repair that we identified. That we don't know if it was repaired, or maybe if it was turned back on accidentally, or maybe it was repaired, or maybe something else happened. But kind of get back with their team over there with the HOA and let them know where we're at and compile that into the last few years of data, but more of an intimate look at what we've seen this year with them. And we know that they are dealing with some pretty interesting material that was picked or decided on, you know, in some areas, and kind of identify those areas that we could maybe see their investment, you know, kind of being directed to. But I think a report, you know, from Public Works, you know, just kind of share our information, and maybe they could discuss it, you know, on one of their monthly meetings. But I could talk to their reps that we seem to work more hand in hand with. I don't know how much longer we'll be working with Stan Hackman primarily. I know he's tried to kind of retire, I think, but he's been kind of our point of contact with the water situation that we've had there. But I think getting something put together, getting the data on a piece of paper, that kind of sharing with them and letting them, you know, we probably should move it on this sooner than later.
I know it's gotta be disappointing with all the other projects that you have going to have.
You know what, I look internally, I'm like, well, how could I, I think the big thing is, you always have an opportunity to maybe find a way to do things, and sometimes you miss those opportunities, and, sometimes you're self-critical, like not seizing that opportunity, but, I just know that there's just always constantly a barrage of things that, continually come at us. It is frustrating to see it come back up. I was kind of for the best on that. I had something I was going to mention, but I lost my train of thought. Anyways, yeah. Thanks, Trustee Switchy.
Real nice with the West Cottonwood Ave. I know it's a small street, but it's something that I ride my bike on pretty much every day, year round, and I've memorized all the potholes and places where there's ice, and now I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, I think the worst thing that'll come out of this is we'll have even more concerns from our local citizens for speeding. That James Street's pretty long and smooth.
Yeah, he did a great job on it. And its little bridge too, with the big rusted
Yeah.
support.
Do some races.
Thank you.
Recreation. Thursday.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and trustees. Few updates from the rec department. Tucker, Caitlin, and I, beginning of first week of October, went to the annual Colorado Park and Recreation Association annual conference. It's the first time that conference has been in person since 2019, and that was held in Breckenridge. And then apparently there was also like cold flu going around Breckenridge while we were up there. So I know I brought that back with me and missed some time the week after, and that was super fun. But a lot of good things did come out of the conference. We had a lot of networking opportunities with the other local park and rec agencies. Spent some time with Lake County, spent some time with Salida Park and Rec, Fair Play, Alamosa, just interacting with our other local agencies. We also, attended sessions that were very valuable, had some good takeaways from that, and also had some interaction with suppliers and contractors for future projects. Biggest things I took away from the conference was the need for updated master plans, specifically in the specifically a recreation master plan and a trails master plan. Looking to probably complete those in 2024. There is some grant funding available from GoCo for planning that we'd likely utilize for those, but that is 2024's project. And then actually had a presentation from Colorado Lottery and GoCo. The lottery funds that we get each year through the CTF, they're anticipating those to be pretty consistent, if not expanding going forward. They're looking into some potential new revenue streams, like accepting not just cash for payments for lotto tickets and scratch offs and that kind of stuff. And also potential of an online lottery in a few years down the road. So our CTF funds are going to be pretty consistent, if not increasing. And then 40% of the actual lottery funds collected each year goes to GoCo. So GoCo has completely redone their whole process in the past few years. They switched to pretty COVID specific grant funding in 2020. And then since then they've kind of transitioned their plan. Couple exciting things coming out of there. One big change is they announced that they would only like to fund complete projects, which I'll talk about here in a second. But they would rather, fund a project start to completion rather than, come in as the stage 2 or the stage 3 of the project to finish it off. So they would like to be a little more complete in the projects they fund through GoCo. And they also have a new program called the Centennial Program, which is, that was the typical projects that we go for are the community impact grants, which are $100,000 to $1 million, $100,000 to $1 million. They have a new project called the Centennial project or grant opportunity that is like once in a lifetime, I think probably like 5 million and above projects. So if we have any of those projects, there's a potential source to fund them. But overall, it was a great conference to attend. A lot of valuable information coming out of there. But the project I was speaking to a minute ago was the Cordova Park. So there is a new group. It's kind of actually an old group formed that was formally together to create the Sunset Vista Park. And the group is kind of back together now, led by Danielle Ryan, who's on our Recreation Advisory Board. And kind of one of the first things that group decided, along with staff and Rec Advisory Board, was to change the name of the park from Sunset Vista to Cordova Park. That'd be in honor of the late Billy Cordova. There's been contact with his family, and they're excited by the idea, and there's a potential at the park to kind of change our potential design a little bit to be a little bit more first responder, firefighter themed. There's also planning for an art structure. And we've actually already even secured some donations for in-kind work for some of that as well. But that group is off and going. They organized a little cleanup, cleaning up some weeds at the park this past weekend. But going forward, we're really going to focus on that park being a regional park to serve the entire west side of town, rather than not just the neighborhood that it's sitting in. Our funding strategy for that going forward is a combination of fund balance that we already have in the bank from the developer way back in the day, some conservation trust fund funds. We're planning to put those towards the park. We're requesting some funds for the county from the county in 2023, but ultimately if we are able to build out the full thing, we would go through that GoCo grant application process. But we're also exploring some other options, like an ADA grant, because the current design for that playground is an ADA playground, which we do not currently have in town, or a potential a first responder grant. Since that is kind of going to be the theme of the park. Staff is currently contacting playground architects for updated costs and updated plans, since we haven't really touched this project since 2018. But ultimately, the goal is to get something on the ground out there in 2023. If we get the grants and we're able to build a full thing, great. But what we've heard from Rec Advisory Board and this group, if the grants aren't possible, at least get something out there. So that is our approach for next year. On the special event side of things, we're gonna have just kind of getting you all prepared. We're gonna have a lot of changes coming up here pretty quick through the end of the year. Leslie and I have been spending a lot of time working on some updates. So we don't have any officially for you yet, but look for an updated fee schedule, an updated fee waiver policy, an updated application for special events, which will be submitted through, which will be able to actually be able to be submitted online through Google Forms. And we're also working on a code change to what would trigger a special event. We're looking at currently it's 200 people or more on town property triggers a special event. We're looking to drop that to 100 people or more as a special event. 100 people on town property, not going to have too much less of an impact than 200 people. If there's 100 people gathered in one spot, PD and fire would certainly need to know about it. Doing some historical research, the limit was set at 200 because they didn't actually want to capture all the special events because they didn't have the staff capacity to process all those events at the time. Now we do have a full-time dedicated staff member for that. So I'm looking to capture those through a code change coming up. So you'll likely see all of those before the end of the year here. And then on the programming side of things, our early fall sports have wrapped up our youth soccer and adult volleyball. And we're starting our youth and our adult basketball program. So adult basketball is currently, the registration is currently full with 12 teams, which is all we have room for in the gym on a given night. Might need to expand to multiple nights and multiple gyms in the future if we want to grow that, because we're currently at capacity. And with our youth basketball program, we have 196 kids signed up to play with us this year. So first games for that are this coming Saturday. With that, I'll open it up to any questions if anybody has any.
I actually do remotely. Can you hear me okay? Sorry, it's just Gina. My question is, because I think I actually brought this up last year. I think Earl was running it then, but with the youth basketball league, is there a reason the women's or the girls basketball team isn't involved in being like a partner? I only ask because for me, like I'm big on equity, and having them to have the chance to have leadership roles and take part in that, I think would be really cool. Now, if it's offered and they decline, that's like, and so be it. But I just want to make sure they have the opportunity to do that as well, if that's possible.
Traditionally, we've always just partnered with the boys team. It was that way when I started. And they've been, we haven't needed additional help running it, I think is kind of the main reason we haven't expanded to the women's to the girls high school team as well. We do definitely utilize the girls. Their coaches don't lead any practices like the boys teams do. Boys teams coaches do, but we do still use them as officials and potentially coaches. I think we actually had a couple high school girls basketball players volunteer to be coaches for us this year.
Cool.
And we do pay them for their time, and we write that check to their program, so they do get some funding out of that for all the time they put in. So yeah, we don't necessarily utilize the girls coaches, but we are definitely planning on utilizing the players.
Okay, perfect. That's great to hear. Equity is a big thing for me. And so I don't know, it starts from when you're little and up to having those opportunities. So I just noticed that. And so I had asked, but thank you so much for going through that and sharing a bit more. I appreciate it.
No, and that might be something we need to do a little deeper research on for next year. Across the board, our girls' numbers are much smaller than our guys. And we've been talking about ways to specifically reach out to the youth girls in the elementary school in 6th grade and figure out why they're not playing, or do more specific marketing to them. And if there's more high school coaches, if more involvement from the high school coaches, that might help too. So might get a little tricky with funding and who does what and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we definitely like to see a lot more youth participation. And actually in the adult basketball program this year, it's an open league, open to both men and women. Usually, we see it's mostly men, but you do see a handful of co-ed teams. This year, all of those women banded together and formed their own team. So there'll be a full team of women competing against the men, which should be pretty interesting this year.
That's awesome. Cool. Hey, thanks so much for all you're doing, Shane. I appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Gina. I think we should pursue, planning for the future. Thanks, Shane.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now we are on business items. Philip, it goes back to you again.
It does, and so
Okay.
this is a public hearing.
Okay,
So if you'll open the public hearing, and we can
Public
jump
hearing.
into staff.
okay, the public hearing is open.
Great. So on page, I jumped off of it and I need to get back, 177, I believe, is my memo. And as I explained last meeting, I'll try to summarize where we're at in the budget in this memo so you can follow the changes from meeting to meeting. And so some of the highlights since we met last meeting is the airport. Well, first off, August sales tax came in, and as we discussed earlier, they came in above budget. So what that ends up doing for 2023 is it increases the projected revenues because we're basing our projection next year on actuals plus the remainder of the budget for this year. So we were able to see an increase in revenues in our 2023 budget because of that. That was the primary reason why we were able to increase the proposed transfer to the capital improvement fund from 390,000 to 480,000. So that helps cover that gap that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail here in a moment. Also, the airport staff did a great job. Last meeting we talked after the $160,000 transfer to the airport. They were still showing a roughly $50,000 deficit. They have they've been able to bring that down to zero. So they have a structurally balanced budget in that sense with that $160,000 transfer. So airport fund is looking much better. One of the other reasons why our transfer to the capital improvement fund was able to increase is the police department is proposing to move forward with moving over to their new report writing software that Dean shared with you last work session, utilizing $2022, $20,000 out of their existing budget this year. So that enables us to lower their operating costs in 2023. There was correspondence with Jeff Parker and his team. We've talked about it for a number of months, but they are proposing to increase their hourly rate by 15%, roughly 15%. And they've been with us for over 10 years, 12 years now. I've seen one increase that was back in 2018. And we do want them to be able to retain talent, just like we do here in our town staff. So I think between Lisa and myself, we very much support that increase. It's still a very modest rate for legal services in the low 200s per hour. And so the budget does reflect that increase, but I know Jeff and working with Lisa wanted to make sure that you all are aware of that. And if you do have questions that, we can definitely field those and talk with Jeff and Catherine about that. But that's another change in the draft budget. So just to recap, general fund is structurally balanced. We've got roughly a $6,000 surplus, projected surplus right now with the transfers we discussed. The water fund is also structurally balanced with about $53,000 in surplus. But again, they will be spending quite a bit into fund balance for, we're carrying over a large amount of money for the infiltration gallery that was in this year's budget, the water tank recoding project that was in this year's budget. Plus, we have some water rights expenditures anticipated next year for Bray Allen and Upper Ark that are above and beyond our normal annual budget for the water fund. So big puts and takes there, but that is a balanced budget right now in the water fund. The main one that we still have work to do is on the capital improvement fund. And you will see on the next page, page 179 and 180 is, or sorry if my numbering's off. Yeah, 179, 180. That's again a summary of our capital projects by fund, split out by funding source. The airport, the street, water, and stormwater are on the first page, and then the general fund requests for capital projects are on the second page. And you'll see there highlighted at the bottom, we have a total of about 652,000 proposed projects that would be relying on the general fund transfer. And as we talked about before, that transfer is currently at 480. So a little bit of a gap there, not necessarily out of the ordinary at this stage in the budget cycle. And I just want to highlight ways that the board and staff can continue to whittle that gap down. Looking at certain projects, moving them out to 2024 or beyond, reducing the scope of some of these projects. We also have the ARPA funds reserved that is set aside, and I say we have roughly 300,000 available from that. You will see on the first page for the water plant project that we are proposing to utilize about 316,000 of the ARPA funds towards that project, which leaves roughly it's actually 400,000, my bad, 400,000 of ARPA funds for that. Joseph politely asked me to remind the board that in the ARPA discussion, we had talked about the water project and we had talked about housing. And so we didn't utilize it much for the Carbonate Street project this year. That we had 100,000 set aside in this year's budget for the Carbonate Street project. Doesn't look like we're going to spend that money this year. So I'm pulling that back next year and leaving the ARPA funds called out in the fund balance sheet. You'll see for the board to decide in discussion with staff, how do we want to utilize roughly 400,000 of that? And it might be towards the housing project. So, but that is there. Unrestricted fund balance, we kind of looked at that, talked about that briefly earlier. We will have a bit over $1 million in the general fund available and an unrestricted fund balance there that could be utilized. I do anticipate September coming in strong in terms of sales tax. So that will probably, again, increase those projections for next year on sales tax revenues just a little bit if that happens. So that's another way that this gap can be reduced. And then looking at other ways to reduce our operating expenses to increase the capital transfer. So that's a lot. That was a mouthful. Apologize for that, but got to explain it somehow. Next meeting, I want to try to emphasize what the proposed budget does to our fund balances if we were to carry forward in 2023. What would the end of 2023 look like in terms of fund balances? Because I think that's a really important way to view this as well. So we'll take a look at that. For the public consumption of the budget, again, all the detail, updated detail is in the packet. I've also put together a very specific budget package that includes the summary of what's going on, the capital projects, and then all of the detail you see in the packet here. That's on our town website. It's also printed and available at Town Hall. So if there is someone from the public that's asking about, specifics, you can make sure to direct them to the website, the packet, or even the website, or myself. I have had a few one-on-one discussions with people from the public about the budget as well. So always happy to do that. With that, I'll take a breath and answer any questions that you might have about what you see here.
You sound relaxed and enthusiastic about it.
Thank you. I do like it.
Yeah, it's good. Mark, did you have something?
No, it's weird. Somebody likes it.
Second.
I think it's weird, somebody likes it.
I get it.
Glad somebody likes it.
Yeah.
Anybody have comments?
No, thank you, though. I've been online on the ClearGov and trying to make my way. I'm more of a words person than a numbers person, but I'm working at that. And I find it really helpful to go through and thanks for sending us the sort of the guide as well. And it's impressive. I mean, a lot to pay attention to.
For sure. Thank you. I will say that I recognize that this capital project summary sheet is a great summary, but it doesn't actually tell you much about the project. Some of these you're very familiar with, some of these you probably haven't seen before. So the next step that I'm going to take is, it is an all in ClearGov under the capital budgeting section, so you can go in there, but there's a nice way to export all of those projects into a PDF. So I'm going to send that out to the board as well, so you can see the details behind the projects as well. So
Good. Any comments from the public?
Drew, Michael, do you see anything?
I don't see anything.
So hearing none, I'll close the public hearing.
We need a motion to continue the hearing to November 8th.
So moved.
Second.
So we have Rowe, Cobb, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, so our next business item is one that Joseph will describe. It's an ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the town of Buena Vista, authorizing the acquisition of certain interests in real property through eminent domain proceedings for public purposes for affordable housing.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll put a quick soundbite out to, I think it's Catherine this evening or Jeff, to be ready for questions that you all may have on this topic.
Hey, Joseph, before you begin, sorry to interrupt. Lisa, can you share the same screen that you're sharing there? We're seeing a different screen online.
Well, it says it's sharing, is it not? Are you not seeing it?
I think you have, right now we're seeing your file system,
Okay.
so just stop
your
sharing.
Windows Explorer.
Oh,
What is it that you're wanting me to share then? Or
Just the packet.
Whatever you're sharing on the screen in that room.
I think it's page 196.
There you go. You got it. It's right there.
you see it now?
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So you all have in your packet, starting on page 196, a memo from myself, which I will just own 100% that I borrowed heavily from a legal memo provided to you all by our town attorney. As you all can imagine, this topic of eminent domain and condemnation is one in which relies heavily on state statutes to guide us, and therefore is largely driven and will largely be coordinated and spearheaded by our attorney. So Jeff has assigned folks in his office that have experience in this arena, and they are the ones that prepared the ordinance that's in your packet. And obviously, Catherine and Jeff can help us understand the details on the legal side. What I'll say is really a couple of minutes on the why. Because I think when we start throwing around words like eminent domain and condemnation, we need to understand why this is necessary and why we're talking about it. So starting on page 196, but really maybe more helpfully on page 197, there's two images that place a little bit of visual context. And so if you go to the next page, to the parcel of land that we're talking about. So the first image that we have on the screen is the zoning map or a section thereof. The pink square on the right is the South Main PUD. And you all are familiar with the large blue kind of to the north of this parcel, which is Collegiate Commons, the apartment units. Obviously, Carbonate Street, phase 1 is in the blue to the northwest. And Carbonate Street phase 2, if you scroll down slightly on that same page, is bordering Carbonate Street on the south. And this subject parcel is that triangle roughly outlined there, which, as you can see, is not large. As a standalone property, it's not buildable because it does not meet any of our dimensional standards. But it's obviously relatively critical when we think about layout for Carbonate Street phase 2 to achieve maximum number of units that we would like to see, that you all have given direction to see, and that would benefit the community the most when it comes to affordable housing. So that's the basic why. Why does this parcel matter? It's because it's right in the middle of Carbonate Street. And the memo that I prepared for you outlines how we discovered this triangle. I assume forever, essentially, we've all assumed that this triangle was owned by town, and it wasn't really distinguished on the assessor's website or other maps that we utilize frequently as being separate from the Utah Street right-of-way, which it's adjacent to. And so through the due diligence that was directed by you all from October of last year to start the vacation process of that Utah Street right-of-way in anticipation of Carbonate Street, we discovered this parcel. We then said, oh, well, we thought we owned this. So we asked for an in-depth chain of title scope of work with the title company. That unearthed not very much. It unearthed a chain of title that ended in, I think, 1890 or thereabouts, and then went cold. So the current ownership of that parcel is unknown, and it hasn't been known since about that time. So well over 100 years. So the why is there. It's Carbonate Street. It's affordable housing, workforce housing for our community. The what is there, which is this parcel with unknown and undemonstrable ownership. And then really it's the question, how do we proceed as a community with your direction? And the way to proceed legally is through eminent domain to take possession of this parcel in possession of the town, and then we are able to use it for the purposes of affordable housing. The memo outlines a couple of brief references to state statute that confer this authority onto town. If you do have questions on that, I would definitely direct them to Catherine or Jeff. But if you have questions on the general idea, I'm happy to answer. The first step of this whole process is adopting or passing this ordinance. And from there, the attorney's office will coordinate the other public notices, court proceedings, and any negotiations that may happen in the unlikely event that an owner does step forward with a claim to the property. So I'll stop there. Yes.
If no one has been paying taxes on this for 120 years, is there any possibility that there are liens against the property that we will end up getting stuck with?
It's a great question that I think should be explored. From my understanding, this parcel has not had a parcel number nor been identified as an actual distinct parcel by the assessor's website or by the assessor's office. My apologies. So I'm not aware of any current taxes or liens on the property, but that's something that would need to be explored.
Other questions? I would entertain a motion to approve of the ordinance to acquire this property through eminent domain. Ordinance number 28.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 28, authorizing the town to acquire certain interests,
Second.
real property through eminent domain for public purposes for affordable housing.
So we have Cobb, Lucrezi. And are you comfortable going forward not knowing the answer to the tax question? As a board? Maybe.
So I might be able to, I don't know if I can assuage your fears entirely. This is Catherine. I'm stepping in for Jeff this evening. So because it doesn't have a parcel, it hasn't been assessed taxes. And I think that's what Joseph alluded to. But the county, I believe trustee, or it's the treasurer, I think it's the trustee, will be a party to this case. And they will tell us if any taxes are owed on the property as a result of the eminent domain action. Typically what they do is they either tell us how much is owed and disclaim any interest in the property if those taxes are paid, or they just disclaim interest if there's no taxes that have been assessed and no taxes are due on the property. So we will uncover that information. But because it's never been given an assessor parcel number and never been assessed, I'm not terribly concerned about that issue.
Okay. So we have a roll call vote.
Trustee Cobb,
Yes.
trustee Hilton Hinga,
Yes.
trustee Jenkins,
Yes.
trustee Lucrezi,
Yes.
trustee Rowe,
Yes.
and trustee Swisher.
Yes.
Good, the motion passes.
So what happens now? It goes before the county?
Catherine can give the detail, but overall, the next step is to start to advertise the fact that this is happening, putting that out to public notice, giving a chance for any party that thinks they have a claim of ownership to the land to come forward. If that does happen, we enter a negotiation period on what fair market value is. Cannot come to an agreement, that's when the court case actually starts. And if no one comes forward, that's when the court case actually starts. So this ordinance really just authorizes the public notice piece of this to begin. And I'm guessing there's other board action coming in the future related to this.
So if no one contests it, it'll be a shorter process.
Yeah.
Yeah, if no one contested, it will be a quiet process and a shorter process. So once we file that petition for condemnation, we may need to take some technical steps for service because we're going to have unknown parties, heirs of the last owner from the turn of the last century. And we may need to publish notice, which takes about 6 weeks total to get the order from the court to publish service or publication by service or service by publication, I apologize. And so that gets published several times in the newspaper. And then after that, we seek a decree, and depending on how busy the court is, we'll get a decree. We will have to post the value of the property with the court for 1 year in case anybody does come forward after the decree is issued. But this will not come back to you. This is the one step you take, and we take care of it from here on out unless something bumpy happens and an owner appears and we have to negotiate, then you get back involved. So if you don't hear from us, it's a good thing.
How does that interact though with the project as a whole? Like if it's 6 weeks to get the notice, get approval, publish it, but then it's a year, is that right? Where you?
It's just,
Fair market value is?
you could probably get the decree, and don't, hold me to this, in about 6 months. And then money will sit at the court for a year in case someone comes forward so that they can be paid, because the decree has already been issued by the court and we record it in the clerk and recorder's record. So the property is ours and we've taken it under our power of eminent domain. And so now the issue of just compensation just kind of hangs out there for about a year. And then if no one comes to claim that money, then the money's returned to the town. But after you get the decree, you are free to move forward with vacating and subdividing and conveying the property.
So to your question, hoping for the 6 month timeline until we have possession of the property and can utilize it, that would not interfere at all or slow down phase 2. And this, honestly, this triangle and its lack of ownership is the reason that phase 2 is phase 2, in conjunction with the collaboration with South Main. But honestly, South Main has been extremely collaborative and proactive. And so this is the thing that's going to hold that had us say that this is phase 2 of the project, knowing that this would take at least 6 months to resolve. So we will be proceeding with phase 1 post haste on Carbon Street. That will be on your agenda next meeting. While that is in entitlements and being constructed, we would hope that this wraps up and we can begin entitlements on phase 2. Gotcha.
Just another quick question. How much, do we know how much money would have to be left with the court? And then how is that reflected in our budget?
I can't recall off the top of my head if we established the value of the property. It's not worth very much because, like Joseph mentioned, it's not buildable. So probably my guess is, Joseph, did you talk to anyone about what the approximate value of the property was at any time?
No, we have not done that step yet. I was just pulling up the square footage, but we would probably come up with a value that we think is fair. And as long as, my understanding, as long as the court agrees, then we wouldn't need to do any sort of formal appraisal.
Okay. My guess is somewhere maybe $5,000. That's kind of a shot in the dark, but it's not worth much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to move to trustee interaction? Cindy, would you like to start? Okay, Devin?
I think I'm good.
Mark?
Yeah, I got a couple things. The first one, I want to thank Trustee Cobb for giving me feedback as far as the CML committee that I reached out, and I sent that into them for the 2023, just ideas from our community about concerns and policy we might want to look at. So I'll keep you informed about where that goes next year, what CML's direction is on Colorado as a whole, and different policy things might come up. But again, thank you, Sue, for your feedback on that. The second one, I've been working on the evaluation for employees for town. And I got down to Judge Green, and I was just curious if the rest of the board would be interesting in maybe having the judge come and present to us, because so I'm supposed to give an evaluation on a person I don't even know.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys would be up for that. I thought it might be a good idea to hear from the judge.
Yeah, Lisa has a good idea. She's gonna go to the court tomorrow.
Yeah, we
And
can
she'll
talk
try to
about it.
catch him and see if he can come to one of our meetings.
Yeah, so as I'll be there tomorrow touring and shadowing and just kind of observing the process,
Right.
and then meeting the judge, obviously. That can be something that I ask of him. I don't know. I'm sure that, his time is limited, but I can definitely ask the question.
Maybe even a memo to us or anything, just get some feedback from
Some
him.
sort of feedback,
Yeah,
yes.
more than anything, yeah.
Yeah, it's,
Kind of a self-evaluation that we can review.
Yep.
thanks for bringing that up, Mark, because it's definitely something that I always struggle with at this time every year. I'm like, how do I evaluate someone I know nothing about? So, I guess I haven't heard anything bad, then I say that.
I'd also thought about trying to go tomorrow, and I might be able to, just to see him in court, but I only have about a half hour to do that, so we'll have to see. But yeah, and I talked with Gina about it, and she had said, if you don't have a chance to do that, just reflect that that you haven't met him and that you can't really evaluate him, I guess. But it'd be nice if we could meet him.
Yeah.
Agree, Mark, good idea.
Okay.
I was just gonna add, I'm on the judicial review board for the Sixth Circuit, and one of the things that as part of that is observing them in court. And I didn't know if there's maybe recording of hearings or something, like if you can't make it in to observe them, if we have something that is, you know, some sort of file or something that we can then observe them, just, you know, demeanor and action in court. And I think also, at least for me, it'd be interesting just to see what's going on in municipal court. Like, you know, what I was observing for that was drastically different than, I don't even know what's going on in municipal court, to be honest. So that could be interesting as well.
What time do they meet tomorrow?
I believe it's at 1.
I was thinking
Uh,
two.
Yeah, 2 o'clock,
2 o'clock, thank you.
and it's in the opinion room there.
Yeah. So.
Thanks, Mark.
That's it. Mayor.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
bringing that up.
If he comes, Gina, can you remind me when you need these reviews?
I think it was right before Thanksgiving.
Around the 18th or something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, so if he was to come, it'd probably be at the next meeting.
Correct, yes.
There'd still be
So I will definitely ask that, I'll request that, but like, if he's not able to come, then maybe sort of a self-evaluation.
Sure.
Thank you. Good. Gina, do you have anything?
No, I don't really have anything. I was just gonna bring up the Judge Green comment, but it seems like everybody else has that handled, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, Peter.
I don't have anything either.
Sue? A couple of things just from earlier tonight. I guess I just wanted to see how we explore further the idea of a sustainability coordinator that was suggested. And then also, there are all these suggestions in our first presentation for possibilities for Carbonate Street. And I guess I wanted to get some sense of whether, you know, what you think about pursuing that. Again, it's staff time to get the funding pulled down, but if we had a sustainability coordinator and we could get it funded or partially funded, it seems like it would also, that position would involve a lot of grant writing. And if that person turned out to be really good at that, they might be able to help us in other areas as well, which is something that we sort of tossed around a little bit. So, and I also heard their point, I guess Tom's point that, you know, we might not get funding for a full-time person or even a part-time person unless we team up with people in the county or Salida or Poncha or something like that. So anyway, just kicking all that around, I also wanted to just get a sense of if you think some of the things that they're suggesting for Carbonate Street make sense, or if Fading West could or would do those things. And
Yeah.
probably can't speak for them.
Well, no, it's been a topic at almost every weekly meeting I've had with Fading West for the past 7 months is renewable energy and project subsidies. So I think there's probably three different buckets that we could think about for Carbonate Street. The first two would be for phase one, because phase one, based on the previous direction of the board, and again, before you next meeting, so you'll have another chance to weigh in on this direction, but the urgency expressed in prior meetings on phase one mean that we can't wait for a lot of these funding mechanisms to come to place in order to proceed. That being said, there are a variety of subsidy opportunities to pursue for phase one now, some of which we've already applied for and are in consideration for, some of which will come open in first quarter of next year. And others, and this would be kind of a second bucket, there are things that low-hanging fruit that we can do now that would continue to provide opportunity for grants to pay for in the future. So one example would be making the project 100% electric and solar panel ready.
Okay.
Even if we can't find money for solar panels today, we could find money in 1 year, 2 years for solar panels, right? So the first bucket is what money is available now or in the next 5 to 6 months that we can pursue. Some of that is energy efficiency related, especially around heat pump technology and other pieces. So Fading West is willing to assess those opportunities. And second bucket is those things that we can low investments now that we can continue to pursue subsidies for in the future. And then the third bucket would be phase two. Right, because that timeline is a little bit larger or longer. Maybe some of these specific funding opportunities I mentioned come online, but in the right timing for that piece of the project.
Okay, great. I'm just encouraged to know it's all still on the table and that sounds like it's being discussed. So.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that you'll hear Fading West talk about next meeting and that we need to keep in mind is one question that did come to Tom Plant, I think from you all tonight was, is there a net financial benefit to the project from before you get the grant, right? So the grant to pursue these technologies will increase the project cost. Is the amount of subsidy that grant is providing going to go beyond that and therefore help lower the project cost overall? Or is it going to be net zero? Is it only going to pay for the improvements to energy efficiency or renewable energies? And that question is going to be at the crux of whether or not some of these opportunities make sense based on that direction from you all with our affordability targets for AMI.
Right.
And utilities are absolutely a part of AMI, but they're a small chunk of AMI.
Okay.
And so we will need to wrestle with if something's going to take a lot of staff time or a lot of added costs and produce no benefit to AMI, should we be pursuing it? And that's a question that you all be able to give us direction on. Or, inverse, if it's going to reduce AMI significantly, should we delay the project to find it or to get it? Those are all variables that we're going to have to find. And by delaying will be increased costs. We know those variables, right? So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have, can I ask a quick question while we're on that topic?
Yeah.
I'm kind of jumping out of turn, but Joseph, it sounds like you have a good insight into what the developer agreement looks like. Will we be able to have that before we receive our packets? Just because it is quite a large thing, and be nice to be able to review that more than a few days before we'll have the talk on the 8th.
Yeah, so the development agreement is not something that's going to be, we're asking for your approval of this next meeting. We're asking for your approval of the property conveyance agreement, where the idea of going to track the property. So hopefully the memo and the interactions, the meeting next week will help frame the sort of why behind why we're not asking for approval of a development agreement at this stage. But no, we will not be sharing a public version of a draft development agreement for the primary reason that there are so many unknowns. We can't offer a realistic picture of what it looks like today. And we'll be fair. I don't want to, cover next meeting's topics tonight necessarily, but that's sort of the gist, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Suggestion.
I just want to add on to the rep idea. Like I thought there was just an interesting, from what Tom was talking about. So when he and I were having a conversation before, there's about another issue that obviously this just came up, but a big part of both the infrastructure and the IRA is that they are providing a lot to administrative support, which had not been there previously.
Right.
And so there is a lot of funds out there to actually implement these programs. And so I think it's the rep would be with the energy office and not through like the town. Like I think they're funding us like a temporary person and their town staff. Because you were saying like they're grant writers, maybe they can help out with something else. My understanding is that they'd be through the energy office, not. I could be wrong.
Oh, I thought it sounded like because they can't reach, they're not as close to the rural communities and don't know. It sounded
I
like.
think they'd be located here, but like I think they'd be part of the state.
But, okay,
I can ask for a couple more details on that.
Yeah.
okay.
Mr. Plant.
You say you can or?
I can ask for a couple more details on
Okay,
that.
good
But
point, Doug.
I also thought that his comments about what they could do really dovetailed nicely with what Jake was talking about and the different policy, but like trying to add public policy to economic development and how those intertwine. And that would be an interesting, it just seemed like there's some synergy there a little bit, but to try to bring additional funds into the county.
Right.
So
That's it. Yeah, thank you.
I do want to share one small thing, and I don't know that it'll make a difference at this point, but it's something that I'm just trying to explore. And one thing that I found interesting when I had a chance to meet with Mr. Erickson was that they are actually working with VIII West as well for workforce housing. And so I think we have a common denominator.
Good.
So I don't know where that leads us, but I think that if there's some discussions about that workforce housing and perhaps it being integrated into the project, maybe we could explore that a little bit more and see if there's some assistance then from Sangre Cristo in return on some of that. So.
And that's a great example of like creative subsidies that may not come from a federal, state, or even regional level, but working with local partners that have aligned interests and saying,
Yeah.
well, if we're going to be helping to meet your goals and saving you money, do you want to make a cash infusion into the capital stack in addition to maybe some renewable energy or whatever? Right?
Sure.
There's always opportunities for those sorts of things, which I think should be pursued and will be pursued. Excellent.
Good. Thanks.
So I have a couple of things. I found myself looking at our trustee handbook, which I think would be a good thing for people to just take a few minutes and look back through it. One thing I found, Gina, on evaluations is that the trustee handbook says that we have to evaluate the town administrator, the town clerk, and the town treasurer. And it leaves out the attorney and the judge.
That's in the code though.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering is, so whether the
So it's inconsistent.
handbook may need to be updated.
Yeah. Catherine, you got any insight on that? I don't know if she's still there.
No, I'm still here. You can definitely, bring in both, our firm, Jeff, and the municipal judge and sit down and talk about what's working and what's not and what your expectations are and that kind of thing. There's no harm in doing that. The thing about lawyers, and not municipal judges, but the thing about lawyers is that, if you're unhappy, you just fire them. That's the end of the because if you don't trust your attorney, then there's no relationship. So it's a very unique situation. Municipal judges, it's not the same. They have to commit malfeasance in order for you to terminate their appointment. So, it's some communities every year they evaluate their attorneys and their judges. Some never do it. It's completely, I think, ultimately up to you. I'm not familiar with what your code says specifically on it. So your code may dictate what needs to occur.
Yeah, the code has them in it, but it sounds like the handbook, the trustee handbook does not. And so there was one that trumps the other, or.
I would say the code trumps the handbook. I don't know how old the handbook is. But yeah, the code's going to trump the handbook every time.
So.
So this is 2021, September of 2021. I'll look through that again.
Yeah.
Another thing I just wanted to bring up is that, we really have to be careful on our emails about not violating the open meetings law. It's so easy to do it. But if you just get an email from somebody and it's interesting to you and it has some other trustee on there, just start a new email and write back to the person that you want it to go to and not use reply or reply all, because once it's gone, it's gone. But speaking of email, I got an invitation from one of the developers to go for a walk or get together for coffee or whatever to talk about the project and my concerns about it. But really my concerns are more that I can't do this. I can't go on a walk with them, because it becomes like a quasi judicial event. You know, that we are supposed to make our decisions here in this room based on what happens here, not based on what happens, you know, over coffee. So just wanted to make that.
So what is, I would like to know the legality of that right here, what you just said.
Well, I think,
Or is it just,
well, you could end up needing to recuse yourself from the discussion later,
but you're not really making a decision, you're just kind of listening.
right?
Unless there's a tie breaker.
Yeah, or I think somebody could potentially sue us for making decisions outside of hearings.
So if I can kind of elaborate a little bit if
Yeah.
that's okay, Madam Mayor. So when you have a quasi judicial decision potentially coming your way, you cannot have any communications outside the hearing regarding that applications, typically land use in your case, or maybe liquor. And so you can't even have the communications. It's not about whether you're making a decision in those conversations where you're having coffee or walking down the street. It's just that you're receiving information outside the public hearing, and you're receiving information that the rest of the trustees are not. The issue is that, and the mayor is correct, you would have to recuse yourself. You would have to disclose the conversation and more than likely recuse yourself even from the discussion. You cannot influence the discussion. The best, our recommended steps are for that person to actually leave the room while the application is discussed. So even in the position where the mayor may not vote, she couldn't be involved even in the discussion. Which, you know, most of you got elected to do a job and you want to be involved in those kinds of things. So it's just best for everybody just to say it's not appropriate, but you can go talk to the staff member if you have questions or concerns or things you need to talk about.
Catherine, is there a certain time period in which something falls into this category?
Yeah, I mean, I think the situation that you're talking about, you know, we're anticipating an application, is my understanding. A sketch plan has already gone through. I think it's pretty clear that the person is wanting to talk about the development in which you will have a role in making a decision in. And so at that point, they're in the process and there's an expectation of an application coming. If it's pie in the sky and there's no anticipation for an application, it's probably okay. I would still be really careful about that conversation. And if an application comes forward, if you remember having a conversation, it's always best to just say, hey, I had this conversation. It was long before the application came in. I just am disclosing it. And more than likely in that case, you wouldn't have to recuse yourself because it's so far before. But if they're in the process, it's just not appropriate.
Thank you.
So I have a question. So if it's not quasi judicial and would say if somebody had a question about short-term rentals or beautification project or something like that, does that not fall in the same category? They want to have a cup of coffee and understand the town's policy or see something about their property or some project?
Yeah, absolutely. So if it's not quasi judicial, it typically the other two things you do are administrative and legislative, and those things can be discussed with the public outside an open meeting at any time you want.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else? Did I leave anybody out? Okay. So the next item of business is an executive session.
It's to keep the recording on until. the motion
I'll read,
made.
yeah, there's some more to read here. Executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and/or instruct negotiators pursuant to CRS section 24-6-402, parenthesis 4, parenthesis E, concerning the Board of Trustees giving direction on the South Main Development Agreement. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have Cobb Swisher. So. Let's see. So now we will go into executive session. And I know that we need the trustees, Cobb, Elton Hinga, Jenkins, Lucrezi, Rowe, and Swisher. Attorney Catherine Sellers. Town staff, including the administrator Parnell Rowe, planning director Joseph Typel. Is there anyone else?
Sean is going to be part of that.
Sean Williams,
And
Public Works Director Sean Williams.
I think Lisa requested that he.
I did,
attend.
because I figured if we were talking about any infrastructure, that it might be good for you to be here.
And is Joel on?
Joel is on the Zoom now.
I've got Joel Benson, Special Projects Manager Joel Benson. Philip Puckett.
Yep.
We have Treasurer Philip Puckett. No one needs. Paula gets to go. So, would you like to continue on right now or take a break first?
I would like to take a break.
Okay, 5-minute break.
Thank you.